Toledo, and I'm the post-secondary counselor at Vernon Hills High School. Erin,
Hi,
um,
everyone. Erin Murphy, post-secondary counselor at Libertyville. Thanks for being here tonight. Thank you to our amazing speakers.
yes, we have Caren Naidoff and Alan Press from Shire Law Group with us once again this year to talk to families about things to consider as your child turns 18 and then, is living independently or goes off to college. So I'm going to turn it over to the two experts. And if you have questions along the way, we're hoping there's a Q&A option for you. If not, I'll figure out how to open the chat. So Caren and Alan, do you guys have a slideshow you want to share?
Yep, we'll do
Yes.
that
Okay,
right now
you
to
want
make
to
sure
make
it
sure
works.
you can, yeah, I was just going to say, let's make
Oh, you
sure.
have to send you a request. There you go.
Okay. You should be good now, I think.
All right.
Super. Okay,
Okay.
great.
And then we're going to play from the start.
Oh,
Okay.
fantastic.
So you
Okay.
guys can see that okay?
Yes, it looks great.
All right,
All right,
fantastic.
great. So thanks everybody for joining us this evening, and a huge thank you to Becky and for Erin for coordinating this and allowing us to bring to your community what you must know when your child turns 18. Again, I'm Caren Naidoff.
And I'm Alan Press, and Caren and I are both partners at Shire Law Group. We're a small estate planning law firm located right here in Lincolnshire, Illinois, so not too far away from you guys. And again, we're very happy to be here. We've done this presentation several times before, and we think it's got a lot of great information. So you're in for a very informative evening. The presentation takes usually around 40 to 45 minutes, so there'll be time for questions as well. So we look forward to presenting this evening, and thank you so much, Erin and Rebecca, for having us and allowing us to present this evening.
So when your children turn 18, there's lots of adventures that lie ahead for them. For those that have seniors who are going to be graduating, congratulations to you and your family. So some of your children might be graduating. Some might be traveling close to home or maybe a little further away. Some might be starting a new job. Others might be moving. They might be moving close to home or again far away into an apartment or into a dorm. Most likely it's a combination of a few of these things. But no matter what direction your child is heading in, there's something that we all share in common when our children turn 18. And that is that they are now considered a legal adult. And with that designation comes some important changes for them, important changes for you, and important changes for your family. And that's what we're going to be focusing on this evening. And this first slide shows some of those changes. So before 18, you could access your child's medical records. So for example, you wanted to check on your child's vaccination history. You could call up to the doctor's office and get that information. And after 18, when your child becomes a legal adult, that right changes. Before 18, you could make decisions about the course of your child's medical treatment. So if your child fell and was injured, you could call up the doctor's office and you could relay what the injuries were and decide on a course of treatment with the doctor. And after 18, that right changes. Before 18, you could speak to your child's doctor. If your child was ill, you could call up the doctor, speak to the nurse, relay what was going on with your child, the symptoms, and decide on a course of action. And after 18, that right changes. Before 18, you could help your child with finances. If your child had a bank account in their name and they got a statement that they didn't understand, you could on their behalf call up the bank and try to get things sorted out. After 18, that right changes. And before 18, you could access your child's educational records. And in certain circumstances after 18, that right also changes. So what is a parent to do? That's the focus of tonight's presentation. We're going to discuss the 3 essential documents that are healthcare and financial powers. We're going to also talk about FERPA. FERPA is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, and that's what gives you access to your child's educational records. And as Alan said, we've done this presentation often, many times, and during the presentations, we've had questions, or after the presentation, we have received questions, and there's some common concerns that we are asked about, and we decided to bring those to you proactively this evening. So Alan is going to touch on wills and trusts and access to digital assets, and I will follow up with a brief discussion about dorm, apartment, and global insurance and health and safety apps. But first, we're going to get started with those 3 essential documents regarding healthcare and financial access. Those 3 documents are a healthcare power of attorney, a HIPAA authorization, and a power of attorney for property. And we're going to take each one of these documents one at a time. I'm going to talk about the healthcare power of attorney and the HIPAA authorization, and then Alan's going to discuss that power of attorney for property. A parent cannot make medical decisions on behalf of their adult child, even in an emergency, unless proper authorization has been put in place. And that proper authorization is a healthcare power of attorney. The healthcare power of attorney is what gives parents or somebody who's designated by the adult child the authority to make medical decisions on their behalf when they cannot make their own. So this authorization becomes especially important if your child is unable to make his or her own medical decisions and they're an adult. They have to have some kind of authorization of who can step in and make those medical decisions for them. If they did not have that authorization, if they did not have the healthcare power of attorney in place, you might have to go to court to get a guardian. And that's expensive and it's aggravating. And during the course of trying to address that crisis that's at hand, having to worry about going to court is going to be something that you do not want to have to be concerned with, and nor does your adult child. We do these documents for our adult clients, young adults, and often they ask us, we don't want to give up our own rights. And we tell them, one of the first things we tell them is that none of these documents supersede or waive their own ability to make their own medical decisions. This document comes into play as an emergency if they were unable to make their own decisions. My friend had her first child, so her oldest, who was going off to college and going to a large university. And when her daughter got there, she was having a little bit of a difficult time acclimating, and she suggested to her daughter that maybe she try and join a extracurricular group. And she decided to go ahead and do that, and she joined a soccer team. And she was having a great time. She was meeting people. And during practice, one of the practices, she collided with another one of her team members, and she was injured very badly. She ended up in University Health Services. She's away from home. It's her first time being away, and she's with doctors that she doesn't know, and she doesn't really understand what she's being told, and she's in a lot of pain. Fortunately, my friend had these documents in place, and she was able to quickly email the healthcare power of attorney to where it needed to go so she could make some decisions on behalf of her child. Importantly, all these documents that we're covering tonight, you can send electronically to wherever they need to go to. When we do these documents for our young adults, we always give them originals, but they and their parents get electronic copies as well. So when you do get these documents done, you want to make sure that you have those electronic copies downloaded somewhere where you can get to them easily, because when you need them, you're going to want them in a place that you know you can get to, easily access them, and send them again wherever they need to go. The HIPAA authorization, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, you've all signed HIPAA authorizations. So this is just about information. The HIPAA allows healthcare providers to release and share medical information with whomever the young adult has designated on their HIPAA authorization to be able to receive that medical information. So this is what allows doctors to speak about a student or an adult child's medical condition with whomever is designated by that adult child on their HIPAA authorization. And in HIPAA, excuse me, you can name as many people as the adult child wants to. There's no hierarchy, so anybody named on that HIPAA authorization can call up, for example, a hospital and get information about what is going on with that young adult. The HIPAA becomes crucial if your adult child is admitted to a medical facility and you need to get information about their medical condition, especially if for some reason they're not able to speak with you directly about their condition, or maybe they don't understand what's being told to them. So they cannot fully relay that medical information to you. And again, at a time of crisis, your primary concern is going to be ensuring that your child's taken care of. So again, you do not need that potential additional burden of a court proceeding and any kind of associated legal costs. It's easy to put these documents in place, and you want to, again, at the time of crisis, be able to just address whatever needs to be dealt with at that time. These documents give you the ability to do that. I actually have a personal example with HIPAA. My son was in school, and I don't know if you'll have the same experience with your children, but he'd gotten sick, and I had said to him, please go, University Health Services, get seen. And he had many reasons why he couldn't. He couldn't get an appointment that was convenient. He had to study. He had an event he had to go to. So he got sicker and sicker. And by the weekend, he was really ill. And he called me and said, I'm going to the emergency room. I want to let you know that I grabbed my phone. I forgot my charger. I have 1 bar left, but don't worry. My friend is driving me and they'll keep you updated on how things are going. So I said, okay. And while I was waiting for some kind of update, it was, during that few minutes, it seems like it's an hour. And finally, his friend texted me and said that he was unable to give me any information because he wasn't authorized to receive any. So I quickly called up that nursing station at the hospital and I said, my son was admitted and I want to find out what's happening. And the nurse said to me, we can't even tell you if he was admitted until we have the proper documentation. So I had my HIPAA authorization. I knew where it was. I got it. I emailed it right away to that nurse's station. And once they got it, I called back and they said, thank you. Now we can tell you what's going on. So I can tell you firsthand how important it is to have these documents in place.
Now we're going to switch over to the financial power of attorney. In Illinois, that's called a power of attorney for property. And think of property in the broadest sense of the word. So Caren has already introduced us to the power of attorney for healthcare. That's appointing a decision maker to make medical decisions for somebody if they cannot make them on their own. And of course, the HIPAA form, which is authorization to obtain medical information. So the power of attorney for property is a document where you can appoint someone to make financial decisions for you if you are unable to make them for yourself. So the form does allow parents to manage their adult child's finances. And again, I mean, you would have this form available, and if your young adult is fine in making their own decisions, of course, they could always ask you for advice or whatever they need to do, but you wouldn't need this form. However, if a situation arose where something had to be done and your young adult could not do that for themselves, then all of a sudden this form would become very important. It's critical if an adult child is injured or ill or is unable either temporarily or permanently to make their own financial decisions. It can relate to anything financial. We do use and recommend, Illinois has a statutory form for this, and there's also a statutory form for the healthcare power of attorney as well. These forms are available online. You could Google Illinois short form power of attorney for property or power of attorney for healthcare, and you will find them. And there are standard powers that are included on the form. When we do these for our clients, we're going to add some additional powers that we felt that the legislature has left out, just to make it as complete as possible. So if the form is needed for something, it's not going to be denied because it's missing a specific power. But really, for anything financial, there's a list of general powers, financial powers. And again, this form becomes very important if your adult child is unable to make their own financial decisions. It would be good for dealing with maybe a tax situation. So a letter comes from the IRS or the Illinois Department of Revenue or some other taxing body, or a tax return needs to be signed. Of course, it would be very useful for anything having to do with banking, or maybe the Division of Department of Motor Vehicles. Any of those different types of tasks would be something that the power of attorney could be used for. Again, the form, if you don't need it, that's great, but it's always great to have this in your arsenal just in case it ever became an issue. I did mention before too that these forms are statutory and they are available. It's always nice, however, to have a lawyer assist with preparing the form, because they do need to be witnessed and notarized, and there's different rules for the different forms, so that can sometimes be confusing. But if you do the form, make sure that you're on your own, make sure that you're following those rules and making sure that it's being witnessed and notarized as required by the law. Also, just as an example, I did mention that the state has various powers that they provide on the form, and there's various powers that we add as additional powers. As an example of that, one of them is in the area of digital assets, because the statutory form doesn't provide for a specific authority to handle any online accounts or digital assets. So the form does allow additional powers to be presented on it. And we do recommend, and when we're preparing the forms for a client, we do include access to digital assets. And this would work well in case you, as the agent, let's say, had to access something online. As a matter of practical advice, we always recommend consider as a family, before maybe your child heads away from home or goes off to school, you might want to consider having a password emergency system or list. This way, if you needed to do something, if you already have the login and the password, of course, that's going to be easier for you to access that account online than trying to have to rely on a separate power of attorney. But if you don't have that password, or the list or the emergency system doesn't exist, then at least you have this authorization contained within the power of attorney. We also get the question, well, this is all great and interesting, but what happens if my adult child is not going to school in Illinois? Does it make sense to have these documents completed here in Illinois before they head off for Connecticut or Pennsylvania or New Mexico or wherever they might be going? And our position is yes. It's always good to get it done. If they, by the way, they have to be 18. So as long as they're 18 years old before they leave and head off for college, it's always kind of nice to get it done before they go, because once they start school, they get very busy. There's lots of things to do, and their ability to get something like this done is going to be limited. So definitely consider getting it done before they leave. If they don't turn 18 until they go to school, well, then it could always be arranged here at home, when they come home for a break or a long weekend or something like that. But we do get the question, if my child is going to school in Texas, will an Illinois power of attorney be honored there? And the answer is yes. So these forms are good in all 50 states. as long as they're validly executed in Illinois, under Illinois law, they will be accepted wherever they're presented across the USA. So that's not something to worry about. Now, could a student, instead of doing it in Illinois, if they're going to be going to school in Florida, just do the forms down there? Of course, that would be okay as well, but they wouldn't have to. They could do the Illinois forms. And quite frankly, they're still Illinois residents, so it's probably even more appropriate to have it done in Illinois. The one exception, I think, being Missouri, where, I think you get a tuition break if your child's a resident of that state. And one of the ways to show residency might be to have Missouri forms or, and have a Missouri attorney assist with that. So that might be an exception. But other than that, having it done in Illinois and getting it done before your adult child heads off to their very busy life in college, getting it done in advance is going to be a great idea.
These documents, the power of attorney for healthcare, the HIPAA authorization, and the power of attorney for property, they give you peace of mind because they allow you to make immediate decisions and give you access to critical information should a crisis occur. I mean, hopefully the documents don't need to be used, but if they do, they're extremely important to have in place so you can focus on the situation at hand. The documents are easy to put in place, and when your child turns 18 and becomes a legal adult, it should be one of the most important things that is on your list. Again, copies of those documents should be kept in a safe and easily accessible place. The electronic documents for sure your children should have who are 18, and also you should have as well as parents. In addition to limitations on access to medical information and to financial information, when your children turn 18 and they are considered a legal adult, your access to their educational records is also limited in certain circumstances. And FERPA, the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, is what governs your access to your child's educational records. And this next slide demonstrates some of the differences before your child became a legal adult and after they turn 18 when they are now considered a legal adult. Before 18, you can view your child's educational records, and after 18, without the proper documentation in place, that right is limited. Before 18, you can request a correction to your child's educational records. And after 18, without the proper documentation in place, that right also changes. Before 18, you can decide who can see your child's educational records. And after 18, again, without the proper documentation in place, that right changes. And before 18, you can get photocopies of your child's educational records. And after 18, again, without the proper documentation in place, that right changes. So there's a common theme here, proper documentation, and that is written consent. And FERPA has a written consent form. And sometimes the colleges have their own FERPA authorizations, and maybe it will contain something also that says your child is accepting the fact that they can use the image for marketing purposes. There might be other things that are part of that college's FERPA authorization. But some of the colleges have the FERPA, some don't. It changes year by year, so we don't know necessarily which universities have them and which don't. Sometimes when your child is filling out forms online, they check a box. They don't even realize that they've checked the FERPA box. We always do backup FERPAs for all of our young adults because it is extremely important that they are put in place. FERPAs are held by the registrar's office. So if you're not sure, you can always call up to the registrar and ask if there is a FERPA in place for your child. There's some misunderstanding around FERPA. A lot of times our young adults think that it's just about giving access to their parents for their grades. It is far more important than that, is the educational records. So if your child was at school and was having a difficult time and they confided in an administrator at school, And that administrator was very concerned about their mental well-being and felt like they had to reach out to you as a parent, they would be unable to do that unless the FERPA authorization was in place. So again, this is a very important document to have in place, and you should definitely check and make sure that there is one on record for your child when they're attending school. The other thing about FERPA is it is school specific. So if your child was going to take classes at another school during the summer, they would need a FERPA for that school as well. And then, as we had said in the beginning of the presentation, often we have common concerns that are related to us when we bring this presentation to the community, and we wanted to bring those to you all tonight. So Alan is going to talk about wills and trusts and access to digital assets, and then I will follow up with Durham Apartment and Global Insurance and health and safety apps.
Thanks, Caren. So we're going to talk briefly about wills and trusts, because people say, we already this evening we presented the healthcare directives, we had the HIPAA form and the healthcare power of attorney. We also had the financial power of attorney and the FERPA form. These powers of attorney and healthcare directives are only effective during lifetime. A will is a document that's going to be effective after death. So the question that we get is, does my adult child, when they turn 18, do they also need to get a will put in place? So let's explore that a little. Of course, the answer is going to be it depends, but let's take a look at the different scenarios. So the healthcare and financial powers of attorney are one essential element of estate planning. Doing a will or trust is another. In order to start this discussion, let's just briefly talk about what a will is. You may already be familiar with this. We've seen things on TV shows or whatever. A will is a document that says how somebody would like their assets to be distributed when they pass away. So a will is only effective at death. A power of attorney only effective during lifetime. We're going to see in a minute when a trust is effective. But again, a will is a basic document that says if I pass away, I would like my assets to be distributed to the following people. I can certainly set a bunch of other parameters and rules around that, but that's generally what a will is going to do. A trust is a document that is effective immediately upon signing. So it's effective during lifetime and it's effective after death. So it could be used to plan, for potential incapacity as well as what you want to have happen to your assets when you pass away. In contrast to a will, a trust or a trust structure is going to allow the person who is creating it to perhaps exercise some control over how and when and under what conditions assets will be distributed out to beneficiaries. And it basically allows a little bit more ability to customize perhaps what somebody is doing. And I'm sure you're saying this is all very interesting, but how does it apply to my adult child? Do they need to have a will or a trust? Well, let's take a look at a couple of questions. Does your adult child have a significant amount of their own assets? If that's the case, like maybe they inherited money or they had a business while they were in high school and they put away a bunch of money and they want to provide for what happens to that money if they pass away, then maybe having a will or a trust would be a good idea. However, there are some substitutes. So for most young adults that haven't necessarily built up a significant amount of wealth yet because they're just entering their adult life, you could use what's called a payable on death designation, a POD. You've probably heard of this before. This is the act of having a beneficiary on different accounts, right? So you could have a bank account that's payable on death to my mother, right? So then if I passed away, my mother would get the assets that are in that account. Also, you want to consider joint ownership, right? And you may have this already with your adult child. And by the way, as a side point, if you have a joint account with your adult child and your adult child is unable to make financial decisions, you wouldn't need a power of attorney in that situation to deal with that account if you're a joint owner, right? Because as a joint owner, you have rights to handle that account as well. And that's also a way that you can avoid this problem of what if somebody passes away? Well, if an account is joint, if I have a joint account with my spouse, when I pass away, if my spouse survives me, she becomes the automatic owner of that account by virtue of being a joint owner. So that's how joint ownership typically will work. And you can also have beneficiary designations. So if I have a life insurance policy and I designate my son as my beneficiary, when I pass away, my son can fill out a claim form and submit that to the insurance company along with my death certificate. And the insurance company will pay the proceeds of that life insurance policy to my son because that's a contract that I made during my lifetime with that insurance company that said, when I pass away, I would like these insurance proceeds to be paid to my beneficiary, in this example, my son. So, beneficiary designations is also a way you can handle the disposition of assets at death. So, it's quite possible, especially with a young adult that may not have a significant amount of their own assets or may have a more modest estate, that they can probably designate their accounts using one of these different alternative methods, and that might be good enough. Of course, as they get older, maybe they get married. Certainly, when they start a family, that for sure is a time where they should consider doing more formal estate planning because they're also going to have the issue of guardianship in case something happened to them and they wanted to provide a guardian for their young child or children. That's a good reason to address estate planning for any young family. So certainly the answer can change as they get older, as their life changes, as they meet new challenges and new things happen during their life. They want to make sure that they've got everything squared away.
Things happen, so you might want to look into insuring yourself with dorm, apartment, or rental or global insurance. So we don't advocate that you obtain any of this insurance, but we just want to bring it to your attention that it's out there. If this is something that you think would be helpful for your family, then certainly worth looking into. If your children are going to be traveling, of course, that global travel insurance could be something that you look into. And also that dorm, apartment, or rental insurance for your children that are going to be moving into a dorm or an apartment, renting a space. I have a example for my other child because I just have so many personal examples here. My daughter was going to school in the middle of Pennsylvania, very cold, and she was told, and so was my son, to never leave their computer alone at school because their world is in their computer and they should always keep an eye on it. So my daughter packed up all of her stuff one very cold, wintry day, coat, hat, backpack, goes to the library to her very favorite spot that she liked to study in. And she was hungry, so she decided that she was going to order some Uber Eats. And when she was told that it was there, she picked up her computer like we had told her that she should probably think about doing, and she took it with her and went to pick up her lunch. When she got back to her favorite spot, her coat was gone. And in addition to being very upset that somebody would steal her coat, it's the middle of winter. She's, thinking, what am I going to do now? It's freezing here. We had dorm insurance and it covered theft. And with that one claim, it paid for itself. And we were able to get her coat replaced within 3 days. There are independent insurance policies that are relatively inexpensive. You should also check your homeowner's insurance to see what that covers and then just kind of compare and see deductibles and what makes more sense if this is something that you want to pursue. But it is something that could be very useful. Different policies cover different things, theft, damage. So just take a look at the options that are out there if this is something that you feel would be beneficial for you and your family and your young adult as they're heading off. We also wanted to bring this to your attention. This is not only for your young adult, but really for all of you and anybody in your family. The medical ID app you can find on your iPhone. You'll see a white box with a red heart on your home screen. If you don't have an iPhone, you can download a similar health app to your smartphone. And this allows first responders to bypass any kind of lock screen and get right into whatever information is put into this medical ID app. And again, we don't recommend, or not recommend using this. We just want to bring it to your attention because it is valuable, especially if there's a health condition or an allergy, possibly to a food or to a medication. So we just wanted to bring this to your attention for those of you who don't know about it. It's a good resource for you to think about and look into if you feel like this is something, again, that would be beneficial. And we get questions about safety apps and what should be downloaded. The first is always vet whatever you're going to be downloading to your phone. Best practices is to ask somebody trustworthy what they use in terms of these safety apps. Of course, the ones that are more known are Life 360. You could do a follow my Uber, follow my walk, find my friends. Yeah, so all of those are vetted and can be utilized. It's just another way to connect with your young adult when they're going off to college.
But just don't abuse it, right? Because you can't let your kids know you're constantly watching them.
Right.
That would be a bad idea.
Yes, or they will end that sharing ability.
Yes.
Very
You don't want to
quickly.
let on how often you actually might look at that, but certainly a good idea to keep tabs on what's going on. So, and communication is always great as well. So, and then we also have the idea of planning remotely. So, of course, during COVID, there were some special rules that we were able to take advantage of. But the important part here is that this planning should get done. I did mention that a lot of these things are available online. So if you're a do-it-yourself type person and you were so inclined to do it yourself, certainly that's available. But again, just be careful with, witnessing and notary and all of the things that might be required with some of these forms. We do recommend, of course, because we are lawyers, that maybe you consider having a lawyer prepare the documents for your young adult. The nice part about the way that we do it is we also spend about 30 or 40 minutes going over the documents with the young adult before they sign them, so we can explain it to them. But certainly, you'll use your judgment on that. Just as a point of reference, we have a special pricing for that. It's $300, so it's definitely below market for what it costs to prepare these documents. But we feel that this is very important to make sure the community knows of the need for having these, and we want to make it as accessible as possible. So, but no matter how you do it, make sure that you consider getting it done, because of course, if for some reason, God forbid, something were to happen and your young adult is no longer able to sign legal documents, I mean, at that point, it's going to be too late and you're going to be stuck going to court and being declared a legal guardian for your adult child. That's going to be time consuming, expensive, public, and completely unnecessary if you have these simple forms in place. So definitely consider getting it done. It's certainly easier and better to spend a little bit of money and have the peace of mind, have the forms completed and never have to use them. They just sit in a drawer. That would be the best scenario, I would think. But if they are needed for anything, then you have them ready to go. And by the way, they could also be used in benign circumstances. Let's say your adult child is not incapacitated, they're just studying abroad for the semester. They're not available to sign something or do something, and you need to do something financial on their behalf. Having that power of attorney and having it at the ready is going to be something that's going to be advantageous under that type of a scenario as well. So it's not only for doom and gloom type of situations, but certainly you don't want to get into a crisis and not have these documents available, because at that point, it might be too late then to go back and try to get these completed.
Some of the most important gifts you can protect your adult child with when they turn 18, when they become a legal adult, is that power of attorney for healthcare, where they designate who can step in and make medical decisions for them if they cannot make their own. The HIPAA authorization, who can have access to their educational, who can have access to their medical information. So if they're in the hospital, certainly you want to be able to call up that hospital and get information as quickly as possible. The power of attorney for property, that's what Alan was just discussing. That power of attorney for property allows you to assist with financial affairs. The consent form to access educational records, that's that FERPA form. And again, you want to make sure that your child has a FERPA form on record, and that's through the registrar's office. A will or a trust if advisable, and if that is something that you have more questions about, you can feel free to call us. We're always happy to answer any questions you might have. If insurance is something that you think would be helpful, global insurance or dorm apartment insurance, looking into that. And then again, if that medical ID app is something that would be beneficial for your family, to think about that resource that's literally at your fingertips. And of course, those safety apps again, and just make sure that you're vetting any safety apps before you're downloading them. So thank you again for joining us this evening. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule. And if anybody has any questions, we're happy to answer. And if you have some questions that you want to direct to us, after the presentation, again, you can contact us, Caren with a C, at shirelawgroup.com and Alan at shirelawgroup.com, or you can call us too, 847-955-9000. This is a topic that's very important for us, and we're passionate about getting the information out. So if there are any questions, we want to make sure that they are answered.
Thank you so much. We'll give a second for folks to leave any questions in the chat if they have any. You both make this really digestible as a parent of a teen. Thank you again. And for those listening or that might have friends that are going to ask you questions or partners, we will be sharing this recording hopefully definitely before school's out. So you can expect that within the next week from Becky and myself. Right.
Oh, we do have something in the Q&A here.
There we go.
Will these slides be sent around after the presentation? Well, no, but the recording itself will be available, as Erin just pointed out. Does the child need to be 18 before executing these types of documents? Yes, we do get plenty of people that come into the office on their 18th birthday. We can think of much better ways to celebrate your 18th birthday than sitting in a lawyer's office, but that's okay. We try to make it as fun as possible. But yes, you do need to be 18. You cannot sign the documents before you're 18.
And as far as FERPA, some of the schools have FERPA forms, some don't. You can certainly ask the school if they do have a FERPA form for the university that your young adult can fill out. It's important to have that FERPA form in place. So you just want to make sure that if the university doesn't supply it, that you're able to get a FERPA written consent form in place. You can just download one of those. And there's two parts on the FERPA. That FERPA does not need to be witnessed or notarized. The first part of the FERPA, you're just going to check that your child is considered a dependent for income tax purposes. That gives you rights under FERPA. And then underneath that, there's another place to sign and date as well. So you just want to make sure that those FERPA forms are filled out correctly. And again, they go to the registrar's office. Like I said, we always do backups of the FERPA.
Yeah, I
form
think
because
even if a school has their own
It's
form, it
important.
can't hurt to have the generic one as
Yeah,
well.
very
I think
important.
that's probably a good idea to get both. Let's see.
That's great.
Let's see, I think one more popped up. Will we still be able to access grades?
Yes,
public school.
because
Public school,
your
yes.
child by definition is still dependent upon you if they're a
Yeah.
high school student. So that's not going to be a problem. You're still going to be able to access grades and educational information while your child is in high school. The question would be if they're 18 and no longer in high school, can you do that with college? You're going to want to have that FERPA authorization at the ready so you can get that information.
Great question. Thanks for the
Yeah.
looking ahead to possible high school issue.
Yes.
Yes. So thank you guys so much for allowing us to speak this evening. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And like Caren said, if anyone, sometimes you get a question after the presentation's over and you're like, oh, gee, I should have asked that. But feel free to shoot us an email. You can email us both. That's probably the best solution because Karen's much quicker in answering emails than I am, I'll have to admit. So send it to both of us.
Send it to both of us. And again, we just want to thank you so much, Becky and Aaron. We really appreciate all the coordination that goes into this and being able to present to the community. We appreciate everybody for getting on tonight.